need to get out of here now.
The announcement came without warning. Metal shutters crashed down over the exits. Armed patrols swept the terminal, and thousands of passengers suddenly realized they weren't travelers anymore. They were captives. Moscow's main airport was sealed. No flights, no exits, no explanations. In the chaos, two strangers found themselves forced into the same corner of survival. One carried only a worn backpack and the restless habit of moving quickly, scanning for possibilities where others saw walls. The other stood rigid, sharp-eyed, weighing every detail, every risk. Different instincts, different worlds. But both understood one thing. Staying still was dangerous. Adebayo Okafor, Yuki Tanaka, was a Japanese activist who had dedicated her life to exposing corporate corruption and environmental crimes. She carried a slim briefcase that contained documents she had been traveling to deliver, evidence that could bring down a major international corporation if it reached the right people. When the metal shutters slammed down and armed guards flooded the terminal, both Adebayo and Yuki immediately understood they were facing something far more dangerous than a routine security delay. Adebayo had covered military coups, political upheavals, and government crackdowns in multiple countries. He recognized the signs of an operation designed to control information and silence inconvenient voices. Yuki had spent years fighting corporations that used government connections to suppress opposition. She had learned to spot the difference between legitimate security measures and intimidation tactics designed to discourage people from asking uncomfortable questions. The precision of this lockdown, the military-style equipment, the deliberate confusion, all of it pointed to something beyond normal airport security. Their different cultural backgrounds shaped how they initially responded to the crisis. Adebayo's instinct was to move, to find people who might have information, to document what was happening while searching for escape routes. His experience in chaotic situations had taught him that standing still was often more dangerous than taking action, even when you weren't sure where that action might lead. Yuki's instinct was to observe first, to understand the full scope of the situation before making any moves that might compromise her position. Her cultural training emphasized the importance of reading social dynamics, understanding power structures, and avoiding actions that might bring unwanted attention from authorities. The guards leading the lockdown operated with military precision under the command of Colonel Petrov, a stern-faced man who communicated through encrypted radio channels with operatives stationed throughout the terminal. His orders were clear and methodical. Separate specific passengers based on predetermined criteria, control information flow, maintain psychological pressure without creating international incidents. Among the guards, Sergeant Kozlov stood out for his attention to detail. He had been tasked with monitoring passenger movements in the service areas, the places where escapees were most likely to attempt breaches. His methodical patrols followed precise timing that he believed made the perimeter impenetrable. As the hours passed, Adebayo and Yuki found themselves in the same areas of the terminal, drawn together by their shared understanding that this was not a normal situation. Adebayo noticed how Yuki remained calm while others panicked, how she seemed to be analyzing rather than simply reacting. There was something professional about her composure that suggested she had dealt with dangerous circumstances before. Yuki noticed how Adebayo moved through the crowds with purpose rather than panic, how he seemed to understand instinctively which rumors were worth investigating and which were just fear talking. His ability to read people and situations quickly was something she recognized as a valuable survival skill. Among the trapped passengers, several figures emerged who would become crucial to understanding the larger picture. Dr. Sarah Blackwood, a British human rights lawyer, had been traveling to Moscow to deliver testimony about corporate violations in African mining operations. Her documents complemented the evidence Yuki carried about environmental crimes in Southeast Asia. Ahmed al-Rashid, a Syrian journalist, had been documenting the flow of weapons and money through Eastern European networks. His photographs and interviews contained information that several governments preferred to keep secret. When the guards separated him from the main passenger groups, both Adebayo and Yuki realized the targeted nature of this operation. Maria Santos, a Brazilian environmental scientist, had been traveling with water samples that proved illegal dumping by multinational corporations. Their first interaction came when they both realized that these passengers were being separated from the main groups based on their work rather than their nationality alone. The guards were particularly interested in people whose research, journalism, or activism threatened specific corporate and government interests. Both Adebayo and Yuki fit these profiles perfectly. The cultural divide initially created tension between them. Adebayo wanted to gather information by talking to other passengers like Dr. Blackwood and Ahmed, building networks, finding out who knew what about the situation. This approach made Yuki nervous. In her experience, drawing attention to yourself when authorities were looking for troublemakers was the fastest way to end up in detention. Night progressed, they began to see how their different approaches could complement each other. When Adebayo's networking revealed that certain areas of the airport were less heavily monitored, Yuki's systematic observation could determine the safest times and routes to explore those areas. When Yuki's careful analysis identified patterns in Sergeant Kozlov's behavior that could be exploited, Adebayo's social skills and cultural adaptability could help them blend in with different groups of passengers to avoid detection. Together, they began to see opportunities that had been invisible to them individually. Adebayo's experience with informal networks helped them identify which guards might be sympathetic or corruptible, which rumors contained useful information, and which passengers like Maria Santos might be willing to help create distractions at crucial moments. Yuki's systematic approach helped them understand the electronic security systems, the timing of Sergeant Kozlov's procedures, and the bureaucratic logic behind Colonel Petrov's lockdown that could be used to predict where weaknesses might exist. Among the airport maintenance staff, they encountered Pavel Volkov, an elderly janitor who had worked in the building for 20 years. His knowledge of the service corridors and forgotten passages proved invaluable. Pavel had no love for the authorities who had taken over his workplace, and his willingness to help came from a simple desire to see the bullies fail. Another crucial figure was Elena Marchenko, a young security technician who had been forced to work overtime to support the lockdown operation. Her access to electronic systems and growing discomfort with what she was witnessing made her an unexpected ally when Adebayo's social skills convinced her that helping them was the right thing to do. As they moved deeper into the airport's hidden infrastructure, their cultural differences became strengths rather than obstacles. Adebayo's comfort with improvisation and quick decision-making allowed them to take advantage of unexpected opportunities. When Pavel showed them a door left unlocked during a shift change, or when Elena provided information about which corridors Sergeant Kozlov would patrol next. Yuki's attention to detail and patience helped them avoid traps that could have ended their escape attempt. Security cameras with unusual coverage patterns that Elena warned them about, electronic locks that appeared broken, but were actually functioning normally, seemingly empty corridors that were actually under remote monitoring by Colonel Petrov's command center. They discovered that many of the other trapped passengers were journalists, activists, and human rights workers from various countries. Dr. Blackwood's legal expertise, Ahmed's documentation of arms trafficking, Maria's environmental evidence, and dozens of other professionals had been deliberately gathered in one place. This was not a random lockdown. It was a targeted operation designed to prevent specific people from reaching their destinations or sharing information they might have gathered during their travels. Adebayo's experience covering international stories helped him understand the geopolitical implications of what they were witnessing. This kind of coordinated action required cooperation between multiple government agencies, possibly from different countries. The people being targeted weren't random. They were all involved in work that threatened powerful interests that Colonel Petrov and his superiors were protecting. Yuki's experience fighting corporate corruption helped her understand the financial motivations behind the operation. The timing, the resources being used, the level of technological sophistication that Elena had described, all of it pointed to the involvement of major corporations with government connections, the kind of entities that could arrange this level of interference with international travel. Chapped together, they began to piece together a larger picture that neither could have seen alone. This wasn't just about preventing Dr. Blackwood, Ahmed, Maria, and others from reaching their destinations. It was about sending a message to the international community of journalists and activists that their work could be disrupted anywhere, anytime without warning or explanation. Their escape route took them through service areas where their different cultural backgrounds proved crucial to success. Adebayo's experience navigating complex social situations in foreign countries helped them interact with Pavel and other maintenance workers who might have been suspicious of strangers in their work areas. Yuki's understanding of organizational hierarchies helped them identify which employees like Elena would have access to the areas they needed to reach, and which would be most likely to help or hinder their progress. The final breakthrough came when they reached the airport's outer perimeter. Adebayo's experience in conflict zones helped him assess the physical barriers they needed to overcome. The fence design, the lighting patterns, the sight lines that Sergeant Kozlov's guards would use to monitor the area. Yuki's systematic approach helped them time their escape perfectly, taking advantage of a shift change that Elena had mentioned would create exactly 6 minutes of reduced surveillance in the section of fence they needed to cross. As they slipped through the gap in the perimeter fence, both Adebayo and Yuki realized that their success had come not despite their cultural differences, but because of them. Adebayo's comfort with uncertainty and quick action had been balanced by Yuki's preference for careful planning and systematic execution. They emerged into the dawn light of Moscow's outskirts, two people from completely different worlds who had learned to trust each other completely during the most dangerous night of their lives. Behind them, Colonel Petrov's operation continued to hold Dr. Blackwood, Ahmed, Maria, and thousands of other passengers who had not been able to find their way to freedom. They parted as they had met. Adebayo Okafor and Yuki Tanaka, strangers from different continents, different cultures, different ways of understanding the world. But they carried with them the knowledge that survival sometimes required building bridges across every kind of difference, cultural, personal, professional. Adebayo would go on to publish stories about international cooperation in suppressing press freedom, drawing on experiences that few other reporters could claim to have lived through personally. His work would help expose networks of corruption that spanned multiple countries and industries, building on the evidence that Dr. Blackwood, Ahmed, and Maria had been prevented from delivering. Yuki would use her experience to develop new strategies for protecting human rights workers who traveled internationally, understanding that the traditional approaches to safety and security were no longer adequate in a world where figures like Colonel Petrov could coordinate their efforts across borders. But more than their professional success, both carried the memory of how Adebayo Okafor and Yuki Tanaka, two people from completely different backgrounds, had found common ground in their shared commitment to truth and justice. They had learned that cultural differences could be sources of strength rather than division, that different approaches to problem solving could complement each other perfectly under pressure. A reminder that the most important stories often emerged from the spaces where different worlds intersected, and that the strongest resistance to oppression came from people who refused to let differences divide them when justice was at stake. Where are you watching from? Share this video with your countrymen and drop your country's name in the comments. I want to see which culture shows up strongest here. This isn't just a story. It's how country's culture's tale connects with another. Stick around and don't forget to subscribe for more cross-cultural storytelling. Comment your view on the play of things in the story.